In a small town along Interstate 40, what started as simple bullying at a truck stop turned into one of the most shocking confrontations in Blue Ridge Haven history, when members of the Dark Serpents MC decided to mock a heavyset truck driver. They had no idea they were targeting Michael Thompson, a decorated Special Forces captain with over 2 decades of combat experience. What unfolded next would transform not just a quiet truck stop, but an entire community. This is the story of how the wrong choice of a target led to the dismantling of a criminal empire, proving that appearances can be dangerously deceiving. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The evening sun cast long shadows across the Blue Ridge truck stop parking lot as Michael Thompson guided his blue Peterbilt into his usual spot. His movements were deliberate, practiced, the kind of efficiency that comes from years of routine. At 52, Michael carried more weight than he did during his military days, but beneath his weathered trucker's cap and plaid shirt lay the disciplined mind of a man who'd led some of the most dangerous missions in modern military history. Linda Peterson wiped down the counter of her diner, watching Michael through the window with a familiar smile. For 5 years, he'd been as regular as clockwork. Tuesday evenings like this one, always ordering the same meal: meatloaf with extra mashed potatoes. What Linda didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Michael's choice of her truck stop wasn't just about the food. It was about position, sightlines, and the strategic value of a location that offered clear views of both highway approaches. Jenny Wilson approached with a fresh pot of coffee as Michael settled onto his usual stool. The usual mic. Michael nodded, his eyes automatically scanning the diner. Old habits died hard. He noted the 4 truckers scattered at various tables, the family of 3 finishing their meal near the window, and Robert Doc Campbell reading his paper in the corner booth. Doc was another regular, though few knew he'd served as a combat medic in 3 combat tours. The peaceful evening routine shattered as 3 motorcycles roared into the parking lot, their straight pipes deliberately loud enough to set everyone's teeth on edge. Through the reflection in the chrome coffee machine, Michael watched 3 men dismount, their leather vests bearing the distinctive Dark Serpents MC patches. The leader, a tall man with cold eyes who went by Hawk, swaggered in first. Behind him came Adder, younger and wiry, with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck, and Ghost, a veteran biker whose scarred face told its own stories. Well, ain't this cozy? He drawled, his voice carrying an edge of mockery. Real nice setup you got here. Linda emerged from the kitchen, her face neutral, but her right hand sliding beneath the counter where Michael knew she kept a baseball bat. Welcome to Blue Ridge. What can I get you gentlemen? Adder smirked, leaning against the counter. How about everything in your register for starters? The few other customers tensed visibly. The father at the family's table instinctively moved to shield his wife and young daughter. Doc Campbell lowered his paper slightly, his eyes alert. Hawk chuckled, placing a hand on Adder's shoulder. Easy there, brother, we're just here to talk business. He turned to Linda. See this stretch of highways under new management? Dark Serpents are expanding our territory, and we're here to discuss your monthly protection fees. Michael continued eating his meatloaf, but his muscles coiled imperceptibly, ready for action. He'd seen this pattern before, both in the military and after small gangs moving into new territory. Always started with intimidation, establishing fear before revealing their true operations. Linda's voice remained steady. This is a family establishment. We don't need any protection. Everyone needs protection, Hawk replied, his tone darkening. Bad things happen to businesses that don't understand that equipment breaks down, supplies go missing, customers have accidents. Ghost wandered toward the family's table, deliberately bumping their daughter's chair. The little girl whimpered, clutching her mother's arm. That's when Michael spoke, his voice calm but carrying the weight of command. The lady said she's not interested. The diner fell silent. Hawk turned slowly, seeming to notice Michael for the first time. Well, looks like we got ourselves a hero. He approached the counter, looming over Michael. This ain't your business, old-timer. Michael finally looked up from his meal, meeting Hawk's gaze. His eyes were steady, showing neither fear nor aggression. You're making it my business. That right? Hawk leaned closer and just "Who do you think you are? Just a guy trying to enjoy his coffee." Michael's voice remained level. "But I've got a pretty good idea who you are." Dark Serpents MC, moving up from Texas, is trying to establish new territory. You start with intimidation at truck stops and diners, then move on to protection rackets, then drugs." Hawk's eyes narrowed. "You seem to know a lot about it." "I know enough to tell you you're making a mistake." Ghost moved toward Michael, his hand drifting toward his belt. "Only mistake being made is by you, old man." Michael didn't move, didn't even tense up. He simply took another sip of his coffee. "Two choices. Gentlemen, you can walk out that door, get on your bikes, and find somewhere else to cause trouble, or you can try whatever you're thinking about trying and we'll see how that works out for everyone." Something in Michael's tone, the absolute certainty in his voice, made Ghost hesitate. Hawk studied Michael more carefully now, noting the military precision of his posture, the deliberate way he controlled his space. "You're making a mistake," Hawk said, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. "No," Michael corrected him quietly, "I'm preventing one." The standoff stretched for several long seconds before Hawk jerked his head toward the door. "Come on, boys, we'll finish this conversation another time." As they mounted their bikes, Hawk pointed two fingers at his eyes, then at the diner, a clear signal they'd be watching. Once the roar of motorcycles faded, the tension in the diner broke. The father of the family's table approached Michael. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what would have happened if." Michael cut him off gently. "Nothing was going to happen to your family. Not here." He turned to Linda. "But you might want to call Sheriff Parker. Let him know the Dark Serpents are moving into his territory." Linda nodded, already reaching for the phone. "They'll be back, won't they?" "Yes," Michael said, returning to his meal. "With more of them next time." Jenny brought him a fresh cup of coffee, her hands still shaking slightly. "What are we going to do?" Michael looked up at her, his expression softening. "We're going to show them that they picked the wrong truck, stopped the wrong community, and definitely the wrong veteran to mess with." Dawn broke over Blue Ridge Haven, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Michael had spent the night making calls, reaching out to his network of veteran truckers. Now sitting at his usual spot at the counter, he watched as familiar faces began filtering in. Linda worked the morning shift herself, pouring coffee for the growing crowd of truckers. "Never seen it this busy this early," Jenny remarked, tying her apron as she started her shift. Michael nodded, scanning the room. Big Steve Johnson, a former Army Ranger turned trucker, sat nearby nursing his coffee. 3 tables over, Doc Campbell was deep in conversation with 2 other drivers. "None of them were here by accident. Friends of yours?" Linda asked quietly as she refilled Michael's cup. "Let's just say we share some common interests," Michael replied, "particularly in keeping places like this safe." The bell above the door chimed as Sheriff David Parker walked in. He was still in his early 40s, but the job had added years to his face. He made his way directly to Michael, settling onto the adjacent stool. "Heard we had some unwelcome visitors last night," Parker said, accepting the coffee Linda offered. Michael turned slightly. "Dark Serpent. 3 of them for now, but there will be more." "Yeah, I know about them. They've been moving up from Texas, taking over truck stops. Had 3 stops shut down in the last month alone due to drug activity. Figured as much. Their patch design includes some cartel symbols I recognized from my time in Special Forces." Parker's eyebrows raised slightly. "Special Forces all this time? I thought you were just another trucker." Michael allowed himself a small smile. "Still am, but before that I spent some time with Joint Task Force operations. Saw groups like the Dark Serpents turn quiet communities into war zones, and now they're here." Parker sighed. "I've got 3 deputies total, Michael. If they come in force, they will." Michael interrupted, "But they won't expect what's waiting for them." The conversation halted as the rumble of motorcycles filled the parking lot. Not just 3 this time. 6 bikes pulled in, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun. Hawk led the pack with Adder close behind. The other 4 riders, new faces, each wearing the Dark Serpent's colors. Inside the diner, the atmosphere shifted. The regular customers tensed, but the truckers Michael had called in remained notably calm. Big Steve casually adjusted his position, giving himself a clear line to the door. Doc Campbell stretched, his movements deliberate as he created space around his table. The bikers entered as a group, their boots heavy on the linoleum Hawk's eyes narrowed as he took in the crowd, obviously not expecting so. Many people this early. Well, look who's still here, Hawk sneered, spotting Michael. His confidence wavered slightly as he noticed Sheriff Parker, but he pressed on. Brought some friends this time. Thought we should continue our conversation about the new management situation. Michael turned slowly on his stool, his movements unhurried. Nothing's changed since last night. This isn't your territory, and it's not going to be. One of the new bikers, a hulking man with a shaved head, stepped forward. You don't get to make that call, old man. Stand down, Steel, Hawk warned, studying the room more carefully now. Something about the trucker's calm demeanor had caught his attention. Just here to talk business, Hawk continued, though his tone suggested otherwise. No, Michael said firmly. You're here to establish a distribution point, same pattern you've used at other stops down south. Intimidation first, then take over the legitimate business. Use it as a front for moving product. Adder's hand drifted toward his jacket, but before he could make a move, Big Steve's voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't, Steve said calmly, not unless you want to find out how many combat veterans are in this room right now. Hawk's eyes darted around, really seeing the other truckers. For the first time he recognized the way they carried themselves, the disciplined stillness in their postures. These weren't ordinary drivers. These were trained fighters trying to look like ordinary drivers. You think bringing in a few other oldtimers changes anything? Hawk's voice carried less conviction. Now this is happening whether you like it or not. Michael stood slowly, his movement drawing all eyes. Let me be very clear. I know your operation. I know your supply. Mind as I spent 20 years tracking and shutting down organizations like yours. You're not the first to try this, and you won't be the last. But right here, right now, you've got a choice. That right? Hawk's hand twitched near his vest. And what choice is that? Leave, find somewhere else to peddle your drugs. Because if you push this, if you really want to make Blue Ridge your battleground, you're not just taking on me or these people in here. You're taking on an entire community of veterans who've spent their lives dealing with threat bigger than you. The diner had fallen completely silent. Even the regular customers seemed to hold their breath, watching the standoff unfold. Sheriff Parker remained seated but alert, his hand casually resting near his holster. Steel took another step forward, but Hawk grabbed his arm. Something in Michael's words, or maybe in the steady gazes of the truckers around the room, had given him pause. This is your territory. Hawk's voice tripped with sarcasm, but there was uncertainty beneath it. No, Michael replied, it's everyone's territory. That's what you don't understand. We're not claiming it, we're protecting it. After a long moment, Hawk jerked his head toward the door. Let's go, he ordered his crew. Plenty of other stops on this highway. As they mounted their bikes, Hawk turned back. This isn't over. Yes, Michael said quietly. It is, you just don't know it yet. The roar of motorcycles filled the air as the Dark Serpents departed. Inside, the tension slowly blowed out of the room. Linda let out a long breath she'd been holding, while Jenny managed a shaky smile. Sheriff Parker stood, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. They'll be back with more numbers next time, I know. Michael nodded. That's what I'm counting on. Time to show them what happens when they target the wrong veteran at the wrong truck stop. The afternoon sun beat down on Blue Ridge truck stop as Michael sat with Sheriff Parker and a growing group of truckers in the far corner of the diner. Linda had closed off this section, giving them privacy to plan. Big Steve spread out a map of the local highways on the table, marking known Dark Serpent sightings with red dots that hit every major stop from Houston up through Oklahoma City. Steve explained, his thick finger tracing the pattern. Always the same method. Intimidation, then take over, then the drugs start flowing. Doc Campbell leaned forward, his reading glasses perched on his nose. According to my contacts, they've got at least 30 full members, maybe more prospects. They're not just some random gang, they're organized. Michael nodded, studying the map. They use the truck stops as distribution hubs. Truckers on their payroll pick up shipments, move them across state lines. The stops provide cover and legitimate business front. And we're right in the middle of their planned expansion, Sheriff Parker added, pointing to their location. Perfect spot to control distribution along 3 major highways. Jenny approached with fresh coffee, her steps hesitant. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you should know. She glanced nervously over her shoulder. 2 guys on bikes have been circling the lot for the past hour. They're not dark serpents, no colors, but they're definitely watching the place. Michael exchange looks with Parker scouts. They said simultaneously, they're studying our patterns. Michael continued, trying to figure out our weaknesses when we're most vulnerable. Big Steve cracked his knuckles. Let's go show them what we think about spies. No, Michael said firmly. Let them watch, let them think they're getting good intelligence. Carl Martinez, a local mechanic and former Army Corps of Engineers, approached their table. Maybe I can help with that. He spread out some technical diagrams. Been thinking about how to control access to the lot. Got some ideas about camera placement, motion sensors. Make it look normal, but give us every advantage. Michael gestured for him to join them. We are interested in everything right now. As they talked, more people began drifting over. A retired school teacher who'd served in military intelligence, a young waitress whose brother was currently deployed overseas, a local farmer who'd been in the National Guard. Each brought something to the table: information, skills, resources. Linda watched from behind the counter, amazed at how quickly her quiet truck stop had transformed into what looked like a military command center. She caught Michael's eye and nodded, determination replacing her earlier fear. The radio at Parker's hip crackled. Sheriff, got a situation at Miller's Gas. Dark Serpents making trouble. They're testing responses, Michael said, quietly, seeing how thin they can stretch law enforcement. Parker stood checking his weapon. I've got to handle this. Keep me updated. After he left, Doc Campbell lowered his voice. Got word from a friend in Oklahoma City PD. Dark Serpents have been buying off local officials, building protection before they move in. Not surprising, Michael replied. Classic insurgency tactics, corrupt the infrastructure before taking territory. Carl Martinez returned with more diagrams. Look at this. We can set up cameras here, and here. Coverage looks casual but gives us sight lines on every approach. I've got some equipment for my security system business we can use. Jenny rushed in from taking out trash. Those scouts are back, but different ones this time. They're photographing vehicles, writing down license plates. Good, Michael said, surprising everyone. Let them think they're in intelligence. Everything they see is what we want them to see. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The afternoon wore on as plans were made and roles assigned. Michael kept one eye on the window, watching the scouts make their passes around Sunset. Big Steve's voice came through the radio. They'd set up, got movement on the South Road. Looks like Hawk and about 10 bikes with him. Michael stood calmly. Everybody remember what we discussed. No one acts alone. No one takes unnecessary risks. The bikers roared into the lot, their increased numbers a clear attempt at intimidation. This time, they didn't all come inside. Hawk entered with just Adder and Steele, leaving the rest to circle the building menacingly on their bikes. Nice little war council you got going here, Hawk called out, eyeing the gathered group. Planning something special for us. Michael stepped forward, positioning himself between the bikers and the others. Just having coffee with friends. You should try it sometime. Having friends. Found out some interesting things about this place, Hawk continued, ignoring the jab. Seems like business has been struggling lately. Tax problems, health code issues, insurance rates going up. He smiled coldly. Amazing how many problems a business can have when the wrong people get involved. Linda stepped forward, her voice steady. Is that a threat? Just an observation, Hawk replied. But things could get easier. Right people get involved, problems have a way of disappearing, like they disappeared at Carson's truck stop. Michael asked, or Miller's place in Oklahoma. Both shut down after the Dark Serpents offered to make their problems go away. Hawk eyes narrowed. You've been doing your homework, so have we. Steele added out his phone. Nice family you got. Linda, daughter in college, right? Be a shame if something happened to her scholarship. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Michael took a step forward, his voice deadly quiet. Threatening families, that's a line you don't want to cross. We cross whatever lines we choose, Hawk replied coldly. You have 24 hours to reconsider your position. After that, he smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes well. Let's just say problems have a way of multiplying. After they roared away, Carl approached Michael. They're not just watching the lot anymore. Got reports of bikes following people home, taking pictures. They're identifying targets. Good, Michael said, surprising him. Let them think they're in control. Every threat, every picture, every active. Intimidation, it's all evidence. We can use evidence of what Jenny asked. Michael's expression hardened of just how far they're willing to go, and when this is over, it won't just be about protecting one truck stop. We're going to expose their entire operation. Outside, more bikes could be heard in the distance circling. Watching, the Dark Serpents weren't finished, and now they had escalated to threats against families. The war for Blue Ridge Haven was about to begin in earnest. The pressure began mounting as soon as the sun rose. First came the whispered phone calls to Linda's suppliers, sudden cancellations, mysterious delivery problems. By mid-morning, fuel trucks were being turned away at highway checkpoints by police officers who just needed to verify some paperwork. Michael watched it all unfold from his usual spot, noting each move in the Dark Serpent campaign of isolation. Right on schedule, he muttered to Sheriff Parker, "They're cutting off our supply lines, first trying to starve us out." Jenny asked, overhearing, as she refilled coffee cups. "More than that, Michael. Explain, they're showing us how much control they have, how many people are on their payroll, every canceled delivery, every police stop. It's a message." The radio crackled with Big Steve's voice. "Got more company. Dark Serpents setting up at both highway exits. They're turning away trucks, telling them Blue Ridge is closed for health code violations." Parker checked his phone just as Seaward State Health Inspector on his way. Betty finds all kinds of problems. Linda emerged from her office, face pale. "Bank just called. There's a problem with our business loan. They're threatening to call in the full amount by end of week." "He's good," Parker admitted, using legitimate pressure points, making it look like unrelated issues. Hard to prove. Coordination. Michael stood, gathering everyone around. "This is just the start. Next will come the personal pressure. Anonymous threats, minor accidents, anything to make us feel isolated and vulnerable." As if on cue, Jenny's phone buzzed. She checked it, hands trembling. "Someone sent pictures of my mom. They've been following her." "Mine too," Linda added, showing similar surveillance photos of her daughter. "Message says we should think about our loved ones before it's too late." Carl Martinez burst through the door, his face grim. "Just got word from my security contacts. Dark Serpents are hitting every business that supplies the truck stop, threatening their other customers, canceling contracts. They're trying to make us toxic to the whole town." Outside, more motorcycles roared past. Not just Dark Serpents, now other gangs they allied with, making shows of force. The message was clear: stand against one, stand against all. Doc Campbell entered with his laptop. "You need to see this. Been monitoring their movements. They're not just targeting us anymore, they're pressuring every truck stop within 50 mi. Anyone who might help us is getting visits." Michael studied the surveillance footage. "They're isolating us, making sure no one comes to our aid." When they finally moved, Linda's phone rang again. This time, it was the fire marshal announcing a surprise inspection. "Third one this week," she said. After hanging up, "found violations nobody's seen in 20 years of inspections. They're building paper trails." Michael explained, "When something happens, they'll have official documentation showing this place was a disaster waiting to happen." Sheriff Parker's radio crackled with reports of Dark Serpents gatherings at every truck stop within 50 miles. The gang was making sure everyone knew the price of supporting Blue Ridge. Carl Martinez approached with more security footage. "Got something interesting. See these guys here?" He pointed to men in suits meeting with gang members, not bikers. "Way they move, way they carry themselves, professionals. Someone's bankrolling this operation." Michael nodded grimly. "Drug money. Dark Serpents are just the muscle. Real poorest higher up." Jenny returned from her break looking shaken. "Just saw 3 bikes following a family that eats here regular. They're not even trying to hide it anymore because they want us to see." Michael said, "Want us to know nowhere's safe, no one's untouchable." Linda gathered her staff, their faces showing the strain. Maybe we should just sell." They made an offer this morning, more than fair price. "That's what they want," Michael replied. "By the legitimate businesses use them as fronts. Classic money laundering setup, but they're hurting innocent people." Jenny protested. "My mom's scared to leave her house." Michael's expression hardened. "I know, and we're going to stop them, but first we need them to commit fully every threat, every act of intimidation. It's all evidence. We're not just fighting for one truck stop anymore. We're building a case that'll take down their entire Operation Outside More Bikes gathered the Dark Serpents were sending a message. Resistance was futile, but in the back office Michael and his team were sending messages of their own. Carl's cameras captured every meeting, every threat. Campbell's contacts tracked money movements. Sheriff Parker quietly built files on corrupt officials. The pressure continued mounting as evening approached. Health inspectors found more violations. Insurance rates mysteriously tripled. Suppliers canceled contracts, but with each new pressure point, each new threat, the Dark Serpents revealed more of their operation. You see what they're doing, don't you? Michael asked Parker as they watched another group of bikes circle the lot. They think they're breaking us down, but they're really just showing us their whole network, every corrupt official, every laundered dollar, every distribution route. They're exposing it all. Question is, Parker replied, how long can we hold out? How many people get hurt before we have enough evidence? Michael's phone buzzed with another threat, this one including photos of Linda's daughter at college. We hold out as long as it takes, because when we move, we're not just shutting down a gang, we're taking apart an entire criminal enterprise. As night fell, the bikes continued their intimidation patrols, but in the truck stops back office, evidence-mounted files grew thicker and a plan took shape. The Dark Serpents thought they were watching Blue Ridge Haven. They didn't realize Blue Ridge Haven was watching them right back. The first attack came just before midnight. A dozen Dark Serpents roared into the nearly empty parking lot of Blue Ridge truck, stopped their bikes moving. In practiced formation, security cameras tracked their approach as Michael and his team watched from inside. Here we go, Michael said quietly, noting how the bikers positioned themselves strategically around the building. First Wave Hawk wasn't among them. He was still dealing with legal issues from a previous incident, but Adder led the group, joined by Steele and several new faces Michael didn't recognize. They dismounted as one, pulling out chains, bats, and other weapons. Time to finish what we started, Adder called out, his voice harrying across the quiet lot. No more warnings, no more talks. Inside, Linda clutched her baseball bat, while Jenny stayed behind the counterphone recording everything big. Steve and Doc Campbell flanked the entrance, while other veteran truckers maintained defensive positions. Throughout the diner, remember, Michael told everyone, let them make the first move. Everything has to be clearly self-defense. The sound of breaking glass shattered the tension as bricks came through the windows. More bikers appeared from the darkness, bringing the total to around 20. They began systematically attacking the building, breaking windows and spray painting threats on the walls. Hold position, Michael ordered as some of the truckers moved to respond. Not yet. Sheriff Parker's voice crackled over the radio. In position, state police are 2 minutes out. Adder, growing frustrated by the lack of response, kicked in the front door. What's wrong, hero? Not so tough without your cop friends around. Michael stepped forward, his voice carrying easily across the room. Last warning. Leave now, or this ends badly for all of you. Several bikers rushed forward, led by Steele. They made it 3 steps into the diner before the trap was sprung. Light suddenly blazed from concealed positions, temporarily blinding the attackers. The veteran truckers moved with military precision, neutralizing threats before they could react. Big Steve caught Steele with a perfect tackle, driving him into the floor. Doc Campbell and 2 others handled his immediate backup. The remaining bikers found themselves facing an organized defense they hadn't expected. Outside, police sirens wailed as state troopers moved in, blocking escape routes that had been carefully pre-planned. The Dark Serpents, caught between the defenders inside and law enforcement outside, quickly discovered they'd walked into an elaborate trap. Drop your weapons, Parker's voice boomed through a megaphone. The building is surrounded. Some bikers tried to run, only to find their bikes mysteriously disabled. Carl Martinez's contribution to the plan. Others surrendered immediately, realizing they were hopelessly outmatched. You don't know what you've started, Steele spat, pinned under Big Steve's knee. Actually, we do, Michael replied, holding up a phone that had been recording everything, every threat, every act of vandalism, all caught on multiple cameras. And that's just the beginning. Carl Martinez approached with his laptop, showing Michael something on the screen. Got their whole approach on thermal imaging shows they planted something by the gas pumps before the attack. Sheriff Parker examined the area, discovering hidden explosives. This wasn't just vandalism, this was attempted Terrorism, exactly, Michael said. They wanted to make it look like an accident. Insurance investigator finds safety violations, fire marshal documents code problems. Then suddenly, there's a tragic explosion as state police processed the scene. Doc Campbell made an interesting discovery. These aren't just gang patches. He said, examining a captured vest, "See these markings? They match cartel identifiers we used to track in military intelligence." Michael studied the vest. They're not just working with cartels, they're owned by them. Dark Serpents are just the public face of a much larger organization. Jenny, still recording everything, pointed out something on her phone. Look at their bikes, different chapters, different territories. This wasn't just local guys. No, Michael agreed, this was sanctioned by their leadership. Which means everything leads back to the top. Parker finished. We're not just dealing with a local gang anymore. Linda surveyed the damage to her diner, broken glass crunching under her feet. Was it worth it, all this destruction? Michael nodded, watching as more police units arrived. Every piece of evidence we gathered tonight connects them to organized crime. Those explosives, they're military grade, someone supplying them with serious hardware. That's not even the best part, Carl added, showing more security footage. Got clear shots of everyone involved, including 3 guys who are supposed to be in jail. Someone's arranging releases, falsifying records, corruption at the judicial level. Parker mused, this goes higher than we thought. As the last of the arrested bikers were loaded into transport vehicles, Michael gathered his core team. Tonight was just the beginning. They had to show force, had to respond to our resistance. But in doing so, they exposed themselves. Doc Campbell finish showed their true nature, their real capabilities, and their real weaknesses. Michael added, they're used to dealing with scared civilians, not organized resistance. When faced with actual opposition, they made mistakes, got sloppy. Outside, more police units arrived. As word spread about the attempted bombing, what had started as simple gang intimidation was now a major criminal investigation. The Dark Serpents had shown their hand, but in doing so, they'd given Michael and his team exactly what they needed. What happens next? Jenny asked, still shaken but determined. Now we go after their entire operation, Michael replied. Every corrupt official, every drug route, every money laundering scheme. They thought they could intimidate a small town. Instead, they just started a war they can't win. The night grew quiet as the scene was processed, evidence collected, arrests documented. But everyone knew this was just the first battle in a much larger conflict. The Dark Serpents would respond with everything they had, but this time Blue Ridge Haven would be ready. Dawn broke over Blue Ridge Haven, revealing the full extent of last night's damage. Boarded windows and spray-painted threats stood as stark reminders of the Dark Serpents' attack. Inside the truck stop, Michael sat with Sheriff Parker and Doc Campbell reviewing surveillance footage from the confrontation. Look at this, Doc pointed to his laptop screen. These aren't just random gang members. See how they move. Military training, maybe private security background, someone's recruiting professionals. Michael nodded, studying the footage. They're building an army, not just a gang. Question is who's bankrolling it? Parker's phone buzzed with an urgent message. Just got word from my contact in Texas. Dark Serpent leadership called an emergency meeting. Our little resistance has gotten their attention. Good, Michael replied. When organizations like this get rattled, they make mistakes. Carl Martinez burst through the door, his face urgent. You need to see this. He spread surveillance photos across the table. Caught these at the state line convoy of black SUVs, heavy security cartel representatives coming to meet with the Dark Serpents leadership. The photos showed expensive vehicles with tinted windows surrounded by motorcycles. They're not even trying to hide anymore, Parker observed. They're showing force. Jenny approached with fresh coffee, her hands steadier than the night before. Some of the arrested bikers are talking. Steele's been asking to make a deal. Not surprising, Michael said. He saw how organized we were, realized they're not dealing with scared civilians anymore. Linda emerged from her office holding more paperwork. Just got calls from 3 other truck stops. Dark Serpents tried the same thing with them last night, but this time the owners fought back. They're organizing their own defense. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore, Michael explained. We're showing others they can resist too. The radio crackled with Big Steve's voice. Caught movement on the South Road. Looks like they're setting up Observation posts through the windows, they could see bikes positioned at strategic points around town. The Dark Serpents were watching, planning their next move, but this time they weren't the only ones gathering. Intelligence found something interesting in the financial records, Doc Campbell said, pulling up more data. Those protection payments they collect, they're being laundered through legitimate businesses, then moved offshore. Classic cartel operation. Parker studied the data. This is bigger than we thought. They're not just running drugs, they're building an infrastructure, taking over transport routes, corrupting officials, establishing legitimate fronts. And now we've disrupted their plans, Michael added, shown others they can fight back. That makes us a serious threat. Linda's phone rang, another bank calling about loan problems. But this time she smiled as she hung up. They're getting sloppy. Bank manager just admitted someone pressured him to call in our loans, gave me names, dates, everything. And they're used to people being too scared to fight back, Michael explained. When faced with real resistance, their whole system starts breaking down. Outside, more bikes arrived, circling the truck stop, but they kept their distance now after last night's defeat. Inside, Michael's team continued gathering intelligence, building their case. Got word from my military contacts, Doc said quietly. These cartel representatives, they're not just here about us, they're planning something bigger. Major drug shipment coming through, using the chaos they create here as cover. Michael's expression hardened. How big? Biggest one yet. They're calling in Dark Serpents chapters from 3 states to provide security planning, to use our resistance as justification for bringing in heavy force. Perfect, Michael said, surprising everyone. Let them bring everything they have, every member, every resource, every corrupt official. Makes it easier to take down their entire operation at once. Carl's surveillance system picked up more movement, bikes gathering at every entrance to town. The Dark Serpents were mounting a show for trying to intimidate the community. But in the truck stop's back office, Michael and his team saw opportunity. They think they're sending us a message, Michael told his gathered allies, showing us their power, but really, they're just showing us their whole operation. Every member they bring in, every dollar they spend, every official they pressure, it's all evidence. Jenny, who'd been quiet most of the morning, spoke up. Some of the regular customers are ready to come in, saying, we should just give up, let them have what they want. That's what they're counting on. Michael replied, fear has always been their best weapon, but now people are seeing something else, seeing that resistance is possible. Sheriff Parker's radio buzzed with updates. Dark Serpents members were being spotted across the state, all heading toward Blue Ridge Haven. The gang was gathering its forces for a major response. Let them come, Michael said. Watching the surveillance feeds, everything they do to try to break us just makes our case stronger. They're not just fighting one truck stop anymore. They're fighting a community that's done being afraid. As the morning wore on, more evidence emerged. Carl's cameras caught meetings between gang members and corrupt officials. Doc's analysis revealed more financial connections. Parker's deputies documented threats and intimidation attempts. The Dark Serpents were preparing for war, but they didn't realize they were playing right into Michael's hands. Every move they made, every threat they issued, every show of force, it all built the case that would eventually bring down not just the gang, but the entire criminal enterprise behind them. You know what happens next, Michael told his team as they watched more bikes gather. They'll hit us with everything they have, tried to make an example of us. And we'll be ready, Linda said firmly, the fear in her voice replaced by determination. More than ready, Michael agreed, because when they show their full force, when they commit everything they have, that's when we spring the real trap. The evening sun cast long shadows across the truck stop parking lot as Michael reviewed intelligence reports with Sheriff Parker. Doc Campbell's laptop displayed surveillance photos showing expensive black SUVs arriving at a private air strip. 50 mi South. Cartel representatives, Parker confirmed, three of them heavy security detail. They're not here just about us anymore. No, Michael agreed. We've disrupted their entire distribution network, forced them to show their hand. Carl Martinez entered carrying more surveillance footage. Got something interesting. Those cartel guys, they're meeting with local officials, Judge Harrison, Commissioner Wells, even the regional bank president, buying influence. Michael explained, setting up protection before they moved their big shipment. Linda approached their table holding an envelope. Just got this delivered by courier. Cashier's check for $2 million. plus papers transferring ownership of 3 more truck stops to me. All I have to do is cooperate with the new management structure. They're getting desperate. Doc observed. Throwing money at the problem means we've got them worried. Jenny rushed in from the parking lot. More bikes coming in, but these ones are different patches from Oklahoma, Texas. Even Louisiana. They're calling in everyone through the windows. They watched as motorcycles filled the surrounding streets. The Dark Serpents were making a show of force, but Michael saw something else in their display. Look at their formation. He pointed out military precision. These aren't just gang members anymore. They're bringing in professionals, mercenaries disguised as bikers. Big Steve's voice crackled over the radio. Got movement at the north checkpoint. Black SUV trying to pass through, claiming federal authority. Let them through. Michael ordered time. They saw what they're really up against. The SUV pulled into the lot, and 3 men in expensive suits emerged. Their leader, a cold-eyed man, introduced himself as Mr. Santiago, though Michael recognized him from intelligence briefings under a different name. Impressive operation you have here, Santiago remarked, studying the truck stop's defenses, but ultimately futile. You're interfering with forces beyond your comprehension. Actually, Michael replied, we understand perfectly. Your cartel needs these transport routes. Dark Serpents provide muscle, corrupt officials provide cover, and legitimate businesses launder the money. Perfect system. Santiago's smile faded slightly. Then you understand why resistance is pointless. We own this territory. Now the only question is whether the transition will be profitable for everyone or unpleasant. That's where you're wrong. Wrong, Michael said calmly. You don't own anything here, and your transition, it's not happening. Bold words, Santiago sneered, but what can one truck stop do against an international organization? Show them. Michael nodded to Carl, who pulled up surveillance footage. On multiple screens, the monitors displayed Dark Serpents meetings with officials, money changing hands, drugs being moved through seemingly legitimate businesses, every criminal connection, every corrupt deal, all documented. We're not just one truck stop, Michael explained. We're a community that's done being afraid, and we've been watching everything. Santiago's composure cracked slightly. You have no idea what you're starting when our shipment comes through, the biggest one yet. Michael interrupted, using multiple transport routes coordinated by Dark Serpents chapters from 3 states. We know all about it. Possible, Santiago whispered. That information is limited to 6 people, Michael finished, including Judge Harrison, who's been feeling quite talkative lately. Amazing what people will reveal when they realize they're on a sinking ship. Outside, more bikes arrived, but now Sheriff Parker's deputies were documenting every movement, every face, every connection. The Dark Serpents thought they were showing strength. Instead, they were exposing their entire network. Last chance, Santiago offered, his voice hard. $10 million. Walk away, forget what you've seen. Linda stepped forward, ripping up the cashier's check. Not for sale, not now, not ever. Santiago's face darkened. Then you leave us no choice when our full force arrives. That's exactly what we're counting on. Michael smiled grimly. Bring everything you have, every member, every corrupt official, every piece of your operation. Make it easy for us. Easy, Santiago laughed. You think you can stand against us? We already are, Michael replied. And while you've been trying to intimidate us, we've been documenting everything, every threat, every bribe, every connection. When this is over, it won't just be about one truck stop. Your entire operation will be exposed. As Santiago and his men left, Doc Campbell approached with more intelligence. They're moving up their timeline. Shipments coming in 3 days instead of next week. Perfect, Michael nodded. They're rushing, getting sloppy. Exactly what we need. The sun set on Blue Ridge Haven as more bikes gathered. More corrupt officials made desperate moves, and more evidence piled up. The Dark Serpents and their cartel backers thought they were preparing for a show of force. They didn't realize they were walking into an elaborate trap. You know what happens next, Michael told his team as they watched Santiago's SUV disappear into the darkness. They'll throw everything they have at us, try to crush us completely, and we'll be ready, Linda said. Firmly. More than ready, Michael agreed, because when they commit their full force, when they bring their entire operation into the open, that's when we spring the real trap. They think they're ending a local resistance. Instead, They're about to expose an international criminal enterprise midnight at Blue Ridge Truck.